let me thank our sponsors, and let me mention all of them. So our presenting sponsor, we want to thank the Delaware Prosperity Partnership for their partnership in this event and all the other things that they do with us and that they do for the state of Delaware. Really, really important, and appreciate their time and effort. For our silver sponsors, Corteva AgriScience, Delaware Business Times, M&T Bank, and WISFIS. To our bronze sponsors, BPG, Chesapeake Utilities, Inc., Leon Weiner Associates, and M. Davis. To our friend sponsors, Bancroft Construction, Carvertise, and Wolson Construction. So we appreciate everybody joining, all of us, and we appreciate all of our sponsors. We couldn't do these things without your participation and our sponsors. So with that, let me turn it over to Lauren Spinelli, who is the Director of Marketing at Carvertise, and she's going to introduce our first speaker and also moderate and curate the Q&A after Gary's presentation. So without further ado, Lauren, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. Well, good morning, everyone. How are you? My name is Lauren Spinelli, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Carvertise. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Carvertise, we are a rideshare-based advertising company. So essentially, we place advertisements onto rideshare cars. So ads on Ubers, ads on Lyfts, ads on DoorDash cars, ads on Grubhub cars. So ultimately, we create and launch highly targeted, memorable, out-of-home advertising campaigns all throughout the country. And for those of you out there, if you have any questions for me after today's program or want to get in touch with me to learn more about Carvertise, please shoot me a note. And obviously I would not be doing my job either if I did not plug Carvertise. So check us out on the web at carvertise.com. Okay, so switching gears, I am here to not only moderate today's session, but to introduce all of you to our speaker, Gary Laben. Gary has more than 30 years of executive leadership and experience in leveraging data to power marketing decisions, and has a track record of growing businesses organically and through acquisition in the fast-moving world of data-driven marketing. In 2018, he successfully led the merger of Research Now and SSI, now rebranded as DYNATA, and he has been involved in the marketing services community, volunteering in various leadership roles with organizations such as Marketing Edge, the Taylor Institute for Direct Marketing, and the Direct Marketing Association. For his industry achievements, he has been honored by Marketing Edge and the Direct Marketing Club of New York. And before joining Research Now as CEO in 2016, Gary was Global Chief Data Officer of Wonderman and CEO of KBM Group. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Johns Hopkins University. So without further ado, your next presenter, Gary Laben.
Thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank everybody for letting me be here and share a little bit about who we are, and more importantly, the work that we do, and very specifically, the work that we've done just a few weeks ago. I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes discussing findings and implications of a study that we performed for the Chamber. I've dedicated the other half of the time or so to address any questions that folks might have. And so maybe just to situate everybody a little bit on who is DYNATA, if we can just go to the next graphic, please. Well, we're the largest first-party data and insights platform in the world. And really what that means is that we source, curate, query, and ultimately we reward. That is, we pay consumers and business professionals who participate in providing their insights, their opinions, and behaviors to businesses all around the world. We do it in real time, we do it online, we do it everywhere, all the time. We have about 62 million active panelists. They complete about over 100 million sessions annually, and they answer billions upon billions of questions each year. By the time I'm done, we'll have completed several hundred projects in the background for our clients, asking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of questions, and getting those answers just in the 30 or so minutes that I'll be speaking. We're not new to what we do here. We've been doing this for over 40 years. We got our start long before I joined the business in face-to-face interviewing, as well as using the telephone, which we still actually use. It's a very viable component to gathering insights, particularly understanding people's intonation and voice sentiment. But about 20 years ago, we literally invented the online market research sector when the commercial internet was nascent. And frankly, there was very little to do on the internet. And so getting people interested in supplying their opinions, behaviors, attitudes, and the like was very, was a great segue. And now it is the cornerstone of what we do for a living. Our clients include any business that wants to understand its market or its customers, whether it's new product development or strategy generation. We work with companies ranging from American Airlines, General Motors, Starbucks, Apple, Google, Facebook, Allstate, Amazon, JP Morgan, McKinsey, you name it, 5,000 clients all around the world. So if we can go to the next graphic, I want to share a little bit of a taste of what we did. And at the end of the day, we speak with real people all day long. And in this particular study that we did, we collected information quantitatively and digitally. But we also captured data that you're about to see here briefly, real people in their own homes, unrehearsed, unprepared, and we use that information to help really bring the insights that we try to generate for our clients to life and highlight particular points. So if you could just please roll this brief video.
People with low income. There's a lot of history museums and locations where you can go if you want to learn more about our state. It's a very scenic place. There's a lot of areas where it's really quiet. It's really good for people who just want to get away from like big cities and stuff like that.
Our state, Joe Biden, beaches, no sales tax, low income tax, especially for senior citizens.
So thanks. If we can go to the next graphic. And that just gives you a little flavor for, you know, there's the voice, the people behind the data that I'm going to present. And so maybe just to begin, let's just talk a little bit about whom we spoke with. And in this particular study, we divided the world into two cohort groups. Those we considered attractors, about 80,000 of them, among whom 10% expressed interest in moving to Delaware. And we followed up with about 10% of that figure with our in-depth survey. And that's certainly enough to be statistically valid and absolutely at a minimum directional for this presentation. And then we also spoke with about 350 residents, with the majority moving to the state within the past year. And then finally, we supplemented some of the data using our phone capability, which you just saw, and even more beyond that, which I'll share at the back end of the presentation. And we did all of that between the dates that you see on the screen. So maybe we can move to the next graphic, please. Talk a little bit about where people are moving from. And so if we go to the next one, please. This graphic shows sort of the states that have residents interested in moving to Delaware. And unsurprisingly, of the people with whom we spoke, those in adjacent or proximal areas really make up the leaderboard in terms of the percentage of individuals who would consider to move to Delaware. And with the exception of Arkansas and Alaska, most are nearby. And interesting, we didn't have time to sort of investigate those two particular points. And you know, it's certainly worthy of doing because of the distance. But if we go to the next graphic, I think there's another story which I'd like to talk about. And this one really talks about the states that have people interested in moving to Delaware by the sheer numbers. And so if you look past the figure and into the raw data, it tells a little bit of a different story. And I think this is very important. And that is that while as a percent of any of these individual states, the number is small, there are significantly more individuals in certain states here. And I think that begs the question, and something absolutely to investigate, which is how should one go about capitalizing on this opportunity? And so if you go to the next graphic, please, you'll see that of the ones, you know, that were in the previous graphic, 4 states, California, Georgia, Illinois, Texas, really carry a lot of weight here from a numbers perspective, and maybe that should be investigated as fertile ground for attracting new residents. So now if we go to the next graphic, let's spend some time on why people are moving to the states. Next graphic, please. And so this chart shows the results of our survey comparing by category on the x-axis, as you can see, those who are residents in blue versus those who are attracted to move in the green. And the residents say declaratively that lower taxes, cost of living, quality of life are the reasons that they've moved, but it doesn't seem to be the driver in attracting to people to the state. Those who are attracted also cite the beaches, the countryside, and the pace of life in similar percentages to lower taxes and quality of living. And so it feels like that is something really important that I think we should investigate. If we go to the next graphics, you'll see that on the previous slide, the pace of life was not a major driver or reason why they moved. And remember, residents also cited the cost of living and lower taxes. But this chart shows that when comparing work-life balances perceptions among Delaware residents versus rest of the USA, they believe it's significantly better. And that really, I think, is important because it suggests that there's a potential strong talk track here and something to investigate when looking to attract potential residents. If we go to the next graphic, please. This is something that I found particularly interesting. If we, keeping our same legend here, where of course blue are the residents and green are those who are attracted. Those attracted believe it's meaningfully easier to find work in the state than those who are already there. And that's maybe perception, maybe real. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's certainly a plus and worth investigating and capitalizing on. On the next graphic, please. You'll see that on this slide, again, using the same legend, just to keep our folks familiar with that, there's a similar perception gap between the two groups as it relates to the quality of jobs. And those attracted perceive the jobs to be of higher quality than those already living there, suggesting that maybe even there's a little bit of a halo effect here, and something, again, to capitalize on. I want to point out, it doesn't mean that one cohort group has the right answer. These are the perceptions of the groups that we interviewed, and that is what is monumentally important. It's not necessarily about right versus wrong. It's how do we identify, how do we track, and how do we speak with and communicate to those whom we're trying to reach. Next graphic, please. Again, following on this theme for this particular graphic, this one speaks to sort of employers, and it finds that those who are attracted to move to Delaware really think more highly of potential employers than those who are already living there. And this could be a case of maybe the grass is always greener, and maybe it's possibly explained by the fact that attractors are I'd say by definition, looking to change their circumstances a little bit by moving. So maybe there is a little bit of that. We go to the next graphic, please. You'll see some data from questions around entrepreneurship. And it was meaningfully clear that those attracted to Delaware are more excited by entrepreneurship opportunities and being self-employed than Delaware residents or even the general US population. And now one could say that those looking to move in general, individuals looking to move in general, might be more predisposed to entrepreneurship, or maybe that sort of idea. But in and of itself, I think it's a very strong data point, very interesting, because I think it provides certainly the seeds for attracting potential residents who are entrepreneurs, business owners, people who are startup minded for that matter, all of whom I think are robust economy drivers. And on the right side of this graphic, you'll see that nearly 70% of the residents think that the idea of these things is more conducive and attractive in Delaware than in other states. And that's a tremendous vote of confidence, especially compared to some of the previous data where those outside the state had more favorable opinions or perceptions as it related to things like jobs, job quality, and job prospects. So I think it's something absolutely to keep in mind. If we go to the next graphic, please. And here's what people described, prioritized, and ultimately valued when they thought about self-employment. Interestingly, paying less in taxes was lowest on the list, but ideas like flexibility, freedom, independence, very, very dominant. So certainly things to keep in mind. Next graphic. So moving beyond work and asking about what Delawareans like to do, this chart, again using the similar themes, compares what residents like to do and whether they think it's better in state to do those things. Clearly, you can see here that outdoor activities, family-related activities are really perceived to be better in state, with some mixed results, interestingly, in terms of the art, and a bit of a dichotomy, I would say, as it relates to food, as you can see on the left side of the graphic. Now, we should probably remind everybody that we did this, of course, while the pandemic is full on, and dining out is likely diminished, so there may be some elevated perception of people wanting to do it versus not doing it for pandemic-related reasons. So just want to point that out. That is a question that certainly has an impact. If we go to the next graphic, please. Moving on to this one, this graphic, again, using the same color-coded legend for residents versus those attracted. We matched the survey respondents to a geodemographic clustering system. And so what that means is we literally took all of the respondents and put them into a system that stratifies individuals generally across socioeconomic scales. And in this case, we used one from a company called Prizm, and it's a life stage segmentation system, which segments into a series of cohort groups, which you can see around the x-axis there. And you can see their catchy names that describe those various cohort groups. And we found, I think, some very important and interesting information. And that is specifically what I circled here, which is that two clusters, midlife success and young achievers, are disproportionately represented in the attractors group. And I think if you look to the left of the chart, you'll see that residents are disproportionately make up this cautious couples, is the third one there from the left, or likely retired cohort group. And this suggests, for me, a very interesting and large opportunity to the circled segments, particularly because those segments imply a younger demographic, and that's a demographic that can invest and spend longer while a resident of the state. And so, it's not just folks looking to go to Delaware who are looking to retire, but the opportunity to find them looking to start businesses to make both themselves and the state wealthy. And so I think that's a really important thing to look at. Now, if we go back to the next graphic, please. This is a little bit more detail on what it means to be in one of those two cohort groups. So I just thought I'd lay that out there. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but you can see quickly where those, what those components are that make up these particular segments. If we move to the next graphic, we asked the respondents some open-ended questions, and we let them use their own words. And we heard a lot about home in the words that they used, and there's really a high degree of belonging and feeling like Delaware is home. And if you move to the next graphic, please, you can see some of the results. Clearly at the top, a sense of being home, the idea that people are consider themselves being from Delaware once they're there. And then if you move to one more. We produced a little bit of a cloud, excuse me, and it's a graphic that we produced from the open-ended questions that we asked about people's one-word thoughts on what's uniquely Delaware. The larger the word, the more frequently it was cited, and clearly this goes to what people are thinking and the types of diction that folks would find responsive in messaging and those kinds of things. And then if we go to kind of the next one here, what does it all mean? Well, first I want to say, we did a very quick study here, and we did it uncommissioned, which means that we didn't, engage the chamber and have the benefit of that to sort of create a strategic look. This was just so that we could get some directional information around the subject. But more importantly, I think it really does demonstrate the power of the data and capitalizing on how to attract more to the state, including who they are, where they are located, what to say, what to emphasize, and even how to go about doing that. And from this data alone, I think that there are easily at least 5 things to kind of think about. Number 1, expanding beyond the Mid-Atlantic states. Number 2, quality of life. So beyond just things like taxes is really important to potential residents. Entrepreneurship, Startup mentality, those kinds of things, I think is absolutely an attractor. Again, I referenced earlier that a huge benefit once you come, but only part of the benefits to going in terms of lower taxes. And then finally, the opportunity with sort of a younger cohort group, families and singles and the like, in terms of attracting those groups. And so that really is the, those are the kind of the summary findings that we had. Obviously, these are just the seeds of which can be planted to grow, huge opportunity and additional kinds of ideas to attract more folks to the state. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have on the subject or in the broader way.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gary. Great content.
Of course.
Sure.
Of course.
So I'll start us off, and if anybody else has any other questions, they can certainly ask them, and I'll make sure to relay those over to Gary. But one question I wanted to start off with, so when you look at who has moved here, right, and who may be interested in coming here, do you think it's viable to combine that data with business license information and recruit those same people to relocate their businesses here too?
So Lauren, that's a great question, because it's absolutely the idea of, what I ended with, which is, we provide some insight that ultimately should drive action. And the next step in that action is, well, what do I do with that data? And the idea of looking at people who own businesses, we referenced the small businesses or entrepreneurship, and match it. Our data can easily be matched to any type of third-party data, and then identifying on an individual by individual basis those who have specific opportunities versus others to bring to the state, business licenses of any one sort or another. We absolutely can do that, and that can form the basis for an outreach for a particular focus for those individuals, and perhaps a different focus for another cohort group based on using any other third-party data or other ideation to drive that. So it doesn't have to be, what will attract folks, I think, isn't just the broad messaging, it's the messaging that speaks to them. And so to the extent that we can take some of the findings, any findings, and slice that up even further, and then have sort of micro messaging, that will result, I think, in some very targeted and successful outreach.
Awesome. Awesome. Makes sense. All right. Let's see. Next question. This is a good one. You identified cultural assets here in Delaware as a reason people see the state as a good place to land, right? So does the data suggest that development directors for like theaters, music, parks, museums, and the like should be reaching out to these newer residents?
Well, for sure, I think that two things. We saw that there was real attraction to sort of the outdoors and the outdoor activities on one hand. And again, I'll point out, I think some of that may actually be accelerated because of the pandemic. People will be wanting to be outdoors, and we should capitalize on that, right? Not just for during the pandemic, but beyond. It should serve as sort of the fulcrum to create that leverage. Having said that, other forms, the arts and the like, we saw a little bit of mixed review, and I think that speaks to the fact that they. The state of Delaware, I think, has disproportionately more arts resources than one would expect, and certainly for a region of its size. And that message needs to get through, I think, a little bit even further to those looking to move, because it seems it's definitely a hidden gem inside the data.
Interesting. So this is actually one of my questions. So consuming all of the, actually, hold on, let me go back. I'm going to ask my COVID question. How is your course of research adjusted since COVID has hit, Gary? Like, in other words, do you think some of the regional or state specific advantages further make themselves known for a more flexible workforce, or does it result in more competition now from the outside region?
Um, well, I guess I would say that the one thing that is interesting, and I think all the world, let alone the U.S., let alone Delaware, is I think has come to face the reality that there are a lot of things that can be done remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And we have 5,000 associates all around the world, and on March 13th they all went home to work. And if you asked me on March 5th, I would have said that would be impossible to do.
Right.
And we're now hearing about the extension of companies allowing folks to work outside the office for a longer period of time, not just right now, as well as work in areas beyond the company headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
The big stories about that, with certainly from Silicon Valley, where cost of living is much higher and people want to be in other places. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Delaware, because I think it speaks to the very the trend that we're seeing from the pandemic, and the opportunity to attract folks who otherwise might not have been able to, or didn't know they could.
Right.
So I think that needs to be part of the messaging, in as much as anything else, because it's a reality, and we're seeing companies continue to extend the length of time that they're willing to consider folks not being in the office, and then of course letting them be permanently outside of the office locations, depending on their roles.
Absolutely. All right, it looks like we're actually getting a couple questions too, so I'm going to kick it over to the Q&A, and then I'll come back to some of mine. But one of a new question we had is, one of the negatives always raised by the younger generation about little to no nightlife in Delaware. It doesn't sound like you guys saw that in your brief study.
No, so thank you for that question. So we, in the time that we had, we put our perspective on what we thought we would capture from the DYNATA point of view, with just to be clear, with little, if you will, insight from the chamber. And that particular point that you're referencing around nightlife, in a follow-up, we absolutely would, we should customize some of the surveying that we're doing to better understand that. We didn't see it, it didn't come out particularly, but to be fair, and I think this is my point, we didn't optimize around that, but it's absolutely something that we can and should do as we think about, what are the key components that we want to tap into and understand that.
Alrighty, next question for you, Gary. You're in the hot seat still. Has the data been broken out by each county? And if so, did you see major differences between each area?
So we capture the information at the individual level. We didn't present today detail beyond the large cohort group. It may result in some very small segments, so you'd have to kind of just question and just understand that. But all of the data we have is available at, we can absolutely segment it at the county and look at those things a little bit differently. So we're certainly happy. All the data that we accumulated for this particular study, we would certainly make available to the chamber for any and all of their activity.
Awesome, awesome. All right, we have another question here. Gary, how do these findings compare to similar data surveys you've done in other states? That's a great question. And what are the real differentiators for Delaware?
And so I wish I could have a tremendous answer for this. We did not, we surveyed in-state for Delaware, as I referenced, and then we kind of did the whole U.S. We can break down this particular study by the neighboring states. Again, we're happy to provide that. But as a point, we didn't perform a similar exercise for neighboring states per se. I think it's a good idea. In the world of sort of healthy competition, it makes sense for one state, frankly, to understand even the how the perceptions are of the other states. not just to understand their own. And so I certainly think that that's a good follow-on activity.
Got it. Got it. And we have another awesome question actually from our friends at DPP, the Delaware Prosperity Partnership. So they are asking, when asking participants about entrepreneurship and starting their own business in Delaware, was there any additional detail about the types of businesses that they'd be interested in starting? For example, are they interested in starting a lifestyle business or a higher growth type company, more along that tech and scientific startup track?
I don't know if the open-ended questions captured any of that, but the beauty of our data is that for that group, we can go back to them tomorrow and just go get the answers to those questions. When you were referring to entrepreneurship and starting up a business, which of these categories of businesses are you considering? Absolutely do those that kind of follow-up, and that's a lot of times that actually generates better data. You can imagine that there's what's called interview fatigue, right? So we want to make sure we capture people's hearts and minds as they are optimally, and so going back and doing the follow-up is a good way to do that and breaking it up into chunks.
Gotcha. Another question for you around Delaware being a retirement destination. So Delaware is a retirement destination and a number of retirees moving here validate that. But you discovered that younger and middle-aged people also see the state as an option. What exactly did you find there, and what would you do if you were us?
So, we did find, as you referenced, some cohort groups very disproportionate from who was already there, who are raising their hands and saying, I'm interested, and I think that this is a jump on it moment, because I think going back to one of the previous sort of questions around willingness to move, there's probably an interesting dichotomy. We haven't quite done research, or at least to my knowledge, on maybe the pandemic is stifling people's ability in some regards to move. Obvious from an economic standpoint, but you would think that emotionally it seems like, and even with the ability to work remotely, there's a willingness to move, and that may be opening up new cohort groups like the two I just mentioned that absolutely I think should be capitalized on. And time is of the essence, I think, in these kinds of things. And so, because it might be two different and unknown cohort groups a year from now, and then that's the value of sort of continuously investigating the research, or doing that research, updating it to make sure that we're always on point for what is the latest trend, if you will, or the latest idea. So absolutely, I would jump on that.
Awesome. Okay.
And the numbers were very profound. I think it wasn't just a little bit. We found some pretty big disparity in those groups.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then just another question from me personally. So much data that you just presented, right, Gary? So, for many of us out there, how do we leverage this? Like, what are kind of the best practices or these next basic steps for all of us who are part of this presentation today to digest this data? What should we do now, right? What are kind of like those best practices, would you say, for people who are just kind of consuming all of this data and just starting out?
Right, and so data overload, too much data is kind of the problem in the digital world, in the digital age now. Yeah. As opposed to not enough.
Especially if you don't have a true like data analytic background, right?
Right.
Where do we start? Like, just normal everyday people.
So I think that the normal everyday is, typically what we do with clients is we would look at the data. We have our statisticians and our researchers sort of help distill sort of the broad themes to the more narrow, to the very on point pieces, and then that becomes sort of that set of insights becomes something that various and different types of user groups, mm-hmm. right? So it could be small businesses or large businesses or government have to sort of cut into, and then we'd work with each one of those user groups to extract sort of the themes, and those themes become the priorities, and those priorities end up being a series of actions. And so if I'm If I'm in government, for example, that may be a different work stream than someone, if I'm in construction or whatever it might be. And so we customize that to the users and make those recommendations so that folks end up with, if you will, a to-do list, right? And how do you, the very thing that you just asked about, how do I take action? Because there's a million actions, but only a fraction of the potential, but only a fraction really could or should apply to the individuals, any one individual, or maybe not, but you can imagine that certain cohort or certain businesses need to take action differently than others.
Sure, totally. No, that's great insight.
And we help that, and we help people do that.
Yes, absolutely. Shameless plug.
No, well, and we have an obligation here, right? I mean, there's a real obligation of dumping data, and you have to stand behind it, right? So that's our job is not done until we do a little help here and make sure that folks can find it useful.
Absolutely.
It beyond the entertainment value is one thing, but at the end of the day, this needs to drive real activity, and that's what we're behind.
Absolutely. All right, let me hop back over into the Q&A and make sure I got everybody. Looks like we have one more. And if anybody else out there has a few other questions, please shoot them my way, and I'll make sure that I relay them over to Gary. So Patty,
Lauren, Mike, I want to jump in real quick here. Okay, sure. Before you go to Patty's. So Gary, tease out for us one more time the question about the answer to the first question that Lauren asked you, and that was pinning business license data to some of the findings that you had. A quick case in point. I know that in Northern Illinois, it's quite common, I grew up there, quite common for people to have lake houses in southern or central Wisconsin. And when I think of Delaware, there's a lot of people in Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the like who have properties maybe down at the beach. Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin at the time intentionally looked at who had second homes and who had business licenses back in Illinois, and it's a very high cost place to do business. And they intentionally went and recruited people from there because they already had a property in Wisconsin. And in this case, we have people know we have second homes in Delaware, and basically made the case, hey, if you bring your business here and you've got 15, 20 more years of work, here's how much more money you'll be worth and how much your business will be worth if you locate here, because we are affordable. It's a comfortable place to live. You've already made an investment. So my question, I guess, to kind of take that one step further, are you familiar, has anybody ever done that? Well, have you ever done that, I guess, and or do you know of economic development officials that do that? And then what's kind of the success rate? So if people, whether it's in Newcastle County up to the north or Kent County in the center of the state or down in Sussex County in the southern part of the state, if the development people there or the economic people driving economic development wanted to pursue a strategy like that, what does your background say, or what's your history say in terms of the success of that working out?
Well, I think thanks, Mike. I think it touches on a couple key themes. People want to be addressed personally, and so you've referenced a particular opportunity that I think is very appealing. Number one. Number two, I think it touches on a series of themes that even the data today showed that are aligned, if you will. The data is aligned with even this particular theme, and so identifying folks who own businesses to move there. In your particular example, I'd say that people are moving there, or the second home is sort of the outdoor activity, and we found in our data that is a huge draw. So I think there's a natural attraction to reach out to people who are there for an outdoor activity, and then to find out sort of what their vocation is, and then speak to them about that. And I think that could be a very successful, and as you referenced with Illinois, it has and Wisconsin was a very successful opportunity. And so I think that's a real strategy. I think it should be combined with matching other types of data to do that. And I think that you probably see some decent success in making those connections. And that's something that, whether it's business licenses or any other sorts of third party or external data, our clients do that with our data all day long, because as much as our data, we like to think that it's informative, it's a piece of the pie. And, our clients are often trying to solve something a little bit beyond that, or, for a little longer period of time. And so we're always trying to help them augment what we learn with the additional and directional data to help them drive the decision or the action that you're thinking about.
Well, thanks. And then, and Lauren, I'll go back on mute here in just a second, but,
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
When I think of, and Jacob's question about other surrounding states, I think this kind of all comes together. When we look at some of the surrounding states, we have some pretty expensive, or some places where it's expensive to do business. And you look at then who is already focused on coming here. DC, New Jersey in particular, very expensive place to live, an expensive place to do business. It just seems like there's an opportunity there. So I just was kind of connecting all those different dots. So appreciate your answer on.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that that's something we, should be investigated and capitalized, because much like the Illinois example, the nearby, the adjacencies lend themselves to the very idea that you've just raised.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll jump back in here. So Gary, just a few more questions here, and then we'll wrap. But in addition to entrepreneurs wanting to start a business here, is there any way to segment existing businesses who might consider moving here?
For sure. I mean, I think that absolutely we can look at anybody who is. I mean, we can our survey. The way we did this particular survey was sort of broad, and we asked, if you will, the cohort groups are you interested, do you live here? And then the broader group, which was, would you be interested in moving? And then we, segmented that down. If you will, what we call profiling questions, we can identify and create data from individuals who own certain types of businesses elsewhere, who are interested in moving. We didn't want to get that granular for this particular study, but I think to your point, the idea around getting more detailed data on particular sets of small business owners, that's as simple as making sure that's the requirement, if you will, the hurdle to be in the study, or if you will, or to be to be in the survey.
Got it.
And so easily done.
Excellent. Thanks for addressing that. And one more question here in the Q&A. It looks like we have from Patty Cannon. Delaware is often referred to as a state of neighbors, and your research indicated friendly was a key word on the word chart. Does that suggest to you that relocating employers would be interested in knowing that they would receive a warm welcome?
I think that, I mean, to that point, this is real data. And so these are the unaided sentiments of individuals who live there. I think the video actually had some verbal articulation of that. And I think those insights, once confirmed, can be the basis for how to message and how to attract individuals to the state. It was not lost on me as well that one of the larger words up there was also scrapple. Right. And as someone who, spent some time in a neighboring state going to school, I had my fair share. And so, we should be proud of that. And these are the kinds of things that drive consumer behavior. At the end of the day, all of this, everything that occurs is consumer behavior. And, whether even if it's enacted by or driven by the face or the name of a business. And so we are emotional beings, and we think, sometimes, maybe some days too much so, but as much with our hearts as with our minds.
Absolutely. And then I just have one more question because I thought this was interesting. It was on slide 20, the what people feel on returning home to Delaware. So just out of curiosity, I know that's what people feel, but did you actually find out why certain people return to Delaware? So people who are Delawareans, you know, born and bred, they move away and then they come back. Was that primarily like work-life balance, or just, you know, they maybe did the city life and wanted to come back, maybe aging parents? Did you find anything there?
We didn't ask the questions on that. Again, part of, you know, ability to do a follow-on is just, you know, for each of those. There were, at the top, there were those very positive words, and then some of them were, you know, were less so. And I think it was worth investigating what was the reasons behind those. Absolutely. We didn't delve in any deeper than that for this particular study. Easily done.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Well, Mike, I don't know if you want to pop back in if you have any other additional questions or.
Well, let me add to what you just the comment or the question you just asked, Lauren, because
Sure.
John Taylor at the DPP actually pointed that out when we were talking about this session with Gary and his colleagues. One of the things that John said, you know, boy, it might be, you know, interesting or helpful for us to focus on people who are exactly as you just described, born and raised here, moved away, you know, and they are already familiar with the place. And so perhaps bringing them back, maybe with or without a business, is a real potential, because you don't have to sell them on the place. They're already familiar with the place. And so
right.
I think, so I liked your question, and John from DPP had already kind of started me thinking about that very line of reasoning. And I think it's something that, you know, all of us, you know, who care about, you know, the laws, the regulations, the policies, and then people that have to do the actual actionable items to attract folks. That's just kind of an interesting line. And I appreciate John kind of framing that in a smart and concise way that he did. And Gary, I appreciate your answer to that too. And
Of course.
But I think, you know, Lauren, to your question, your larger question, you know, that is, that would seem like a really interesting direction to go for all the reasons.
Because I was one of those people, right? You know, I was born and raised in Delaware, and then I moved to Boston and, you know, stayed up there for 8 years. But ultimately, you know, I had my own personal decisions for coming back. So I was just curious.
No, that's great. Great. Well, let me wrap up and
Sure.
thank you both, Gary, for
Thank
you and the team and all the research. Lauren, for your curating all of this, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gary is a former colleague of mine from years ago, and has been someone who I've always believed is a real leader, and by all the accolades he's gotten in the industry over the decades, prove that he is. And so I would encourage folks, if you have follow-up questions, to reach out to Gary's team. They're available to you know, kind of take this another step, or if you heard something today that is interesting to you, that you want to tease out further, that might help your business or might help you know, the organization that you work for, he's available. And then Lauren, who's both a colleague and a friend, I appreciate you jumping in today. And
of course, I'm happy to do it. No, this was fun. And nice to meet you, Gary.
Of course, likewise, and thank you as in our Mutual Admiration Society, as a longstanding friend of Mike. You know, we're happy to provide further information and delve a little bit deeper here for the chamber, and make sure that we can turn some of this data into some useful insight and ultimately some action.
Great, thanks very much, Gary. If folks, you want to go back to your agenda, and if you take a look at the next agenda item, you'll see the link that'll connect you to the next session. So please make sure that you do that, and you'll be connected to our session with Patrick Callahan from Compass Red. So again, Gary and Lauren, thank you very much. And folks, we'll see you at the next session. Thank you, everybody.